This is a cut to the chase video on how to do simple navigation, button navigation in Adobe Animate. And I'm also going to show a little bit of how to animate as well. So we've opened up Adobe Animate. So open your Animate and you should be presented with a window that looks something like this. If it looks a little bit different, just make sure that you select Action Script 3 right here. This is basically Flash. So I'm going to select that, click it, and I then have a stage, and I can make this stage any size I want. If you look on the properties box, this big box here on the side, you'll see that it does have a size of width and height for your stage, and you can change that if you wish. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to make something to animate. So I've got a bunch of tools here on the right, like drawing tools, select tools, text, pen, some shapes, things like this. So I'm going to take this box shape right here, the rectangle tool, and I'm going to make a box. And you'll notice that I can change the color of this box here on the lower right. I can also change the outline color, the fill in the stroke. So now I'm going to select the box because that's what I want to animate, and I have to tell the computer this is what I want to move. So there's two selectors up here, and the very first one selects things like it's pixels, and the second one selects things like it's vector, like it's math. So I'm going to use the top selector. It doesn't really matter which one you use in this case. It's just easier or harder depending upon what you're trying to do. So right now I'll just do the pixel-ish selector. So there it is. And now I have to tell the computer this is the thing I want to move. So under modify, I'm going to convert that to a symbol, which sort of puts an envelope around it to tell the computer this is the entire thing that I want to move. So I convert it to a symbol, and it's going to be a movie clip, which is probably what you're defaulting to. And it's called symbol 1 by default. I'm going to change it to box. It's a good idea to start labeling things just so you can remember what they are later. You can see what they are later. So now it's a box, and it has an envelope around it. So now if I want it to move, you'll notice here on the very bottom you've got a timeline. This timeline has seconds that are marked, 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, and also frames. So we're running at 24 frames per second, which is why these numbers correspond that way. So if I want this to move, I'm going to right click on the very first frame, and I'm going to say create motion tween. And it throws you out to 1 second in time at 24 frames. Now you can make this longer or shorter as you wish just by clicking and dragging it to a new frame. I can make it 2 seconds long, for example. And you'll notice that there's a red playhead that you can drag, and that's where you are in time. You can scrub the playhead and see what's happening. Right now, nothing's happening. So I'm going to put this playhead out at 2 seconds, and now I'm going to move the box. And you'll see it even gives you a line that shows you all these little blue dots that correspond to all the frames you use to get it there. And now I'm going to take my playhead, my little red playhead down here in the timeline, and I can scrub that now back and forth and see the movement. Now, if I want to see it move in real time, to actually see a preview of what my Flash movie is going to look like, I'm going to hit Command and Enter. And that will generate a temporary Flash movie. You'll notice that it loops. It just starts at frame 1, it goes to frame 24, or 48 in this case because it went to 2 seconds, and then loops back around to frame 1, and you have your animation. So now I want to control this animation. The first thing I have to do is get it to not loop. I have to get it to stop at frame 1, and then maybe another button to make it go to the end and actually play. So everything you do in Adobe Animate, it's a good idea to make a new layer for every object you're going to make. I'm now going to make a button, so I'm going to make a new layer for that. Here on the lower left, you will see that there's a new layer button here in the corner. There's a folder for when you get a bunch of layers and you have to organize them into folders because you're getting to be too many. And then the little trash can if you ever want to delete a layer. So I'm going to make a new layer. There's my new layer. You can label these layers by double clicking them. I'll call this one button. Just so I know what's going on. I'm here at frame 1 again, and that's where I'm going to put my button. So I'll just take another shape. You can make a button out of anything you like. I'll just take this shape right here. And this is going to be my first button. So now I've got to tell the computer I want this to be a button, so I have to select it. So I select it. I then say modify, convert to symbol, just like we did for the movie symbol that just went across the screen. But this time, instead of saying movie clip, we're going to call it a button. So in the menu here, you'll see you can make it a button. And I'll just call this the forward button, because that's the button I'm going to use to move it forward. Okay, there's the button. You see, put a box around it, put an envelope around it to say this is going to be the button. So now I have to script the button. And you can do this without actually writing a script, because it's got these code snippets that you can just drag and or we'll double click on them and they will be written for you. So under Window, I'm going to open up the Actions window, because that's where it writes everything. So here's the Actions window. And if you see the larger than, less than symbols together here, this is where you can get your code snippets. So you can click that. Another place to go directly to code snippets is in the window menu right here. You'll see it's got code snippets. So the code snippets that we're looking for are in Action Script. You can disregard these other two folders here, because that's for a different format. So I'm going to open up the Action Script. It's got subfolders. The only one we're interested in right now is timeline navigation, because that's all we're going to do is we're going to navigate our timeline. So I open that up and you'll see it's got stop at this frame, click to go to frame and stop, etc., etc. This is basically where all our controls are going to be. All we have to do is double click them and it writes the stuff for you. So the first thing you want it to do is stop at the first frame. Don't play, just stop there. So I double click stop at this frame. Here's what it writes. It writes a long comment that the computer ignores just for us. And then this is the code, the stop, parentheses, and the semicolon. All right, so now if I hit Command Return or Command Enter, and to see what my movie is going to look like in real time, it just stops at the first frame. And you'll notice that if I roll over my button, it does look like a button, because my mouse cursor turns into a little glove. It doesn't do anything yet. Okay, so now let's code that button. So you have to click on the button to tell the computer this is the button I want to code, because it has to know these things. And I want this button to go to a frame 2 in my case, and play something. Well, start playing rather. So I click that. Now what that does, it gives you this big comment again, and here's the code it writes. And it just defaults to frame 5, and you're supposed to change that 5 to any number you wish. In this case, I want it to just go to the next frame, which is frame 2. So I'll put a 2 in there. And that's really all we got to do. So now I'm going to hit Command and Enter, and I'm still stopped at frame 1. But if I click the button, it will play and then loop around and stop again at frame 1. So that's the logic of it. It stops it. It's told to stop at frame 1, and then when I click the button, go to frame 2 and start playing, it does, and then it loops around to frame 1 again and stops, because it loops. Now you'll notice that as we write Action Script, the program will make a new layer at the top here called Actions, the capital A, and it will write these keyframes with little A's on top of them to let you know that that's where there is some code written. That's where the action code is written. So it does this for you, which is pretty convenient. So now, instead of having it go to the end and then loop back around to the start, let's just have it stop at the end. So in order to do that, I have to put a new stop action here at the end. So I actually have to click on that frame here at the end at 2 seconds. And because that's where I want to put the new stop action. I want it to stop there. So once I click on that frame, I could then click this, double click the stop at this frame deal again. So I'll do that, and it writes a new stop action at that frame. It makes a keyframe for you, and it puts a little A on top of it to show you that there's an action. So here's Command Return. It stops at frame 1. I click my button, go to frame 2 and play, and stops at the last frame. Now I have no way of getting back to the first frame. I would need a new button to get back to frame 1 again. So let's do that. Let's make a new button that's going to go back to frame 1. So like I said, buttons should all have their own layers. In fact, every element you put on stage should have its own layer. You have to divide everything up, or else Animate will get confused. So you can see these layers. These layers are like Photoshop layers. They just go right on top of each other. And so you've got layers going this way and timeline going that way. So I'm going to click the button layer here because that's where I want my new layer on top. It's just better for my organization. So I'm going to make a new layer. I mean, it could be anywhere, but I'm just going to stick all the buttons together. And it's called layer 3, but I'll rename it as button 2 so I know what's going on. So now the button 2 layer, I'll click on that very first frame of the button 2 layer, and I'll draw another shape. I'll draw like a circle. And I will select it. And then I will modify, convert it to symbol, make it a button, and this button is going to I'll call it like go to start, so that I know that's what it's doing. Go to start, that works. Now let's code it. So I'm back here at frame 1. I'm going to put my coding in at frame 1. So I suppose I could put it at the last frame too, but I think it's a good idea to do it right now. I think it'll better convention to let it see the code immediately. And I'm going to click my button to let it know that's the button I want to code. And what I wanted to do is go to a frame. In other words, I wanted to go to frame 1. That's where I wanted to go, the very first one. Go to frame and stop. So that's what I'm going to click here and double click it. Click to go to frame and stop. Click. And what frame do I want it to go to? I mean, it defaults to 5. Well, I want it to go back to frame 1 and stop. So let's see what we got now. I hit Command Enter. So these are my 2 buttons, and this is my little animation. So this button takes it to the end and stops, and this button just puts us back at the beginning. That's all it does. Takes us to the end, brings us to the beginning. Okay, whenever you make symbols, which is what we've been doing, we've made a movie clip and 2 buttons, it puts it in the symbols menu, which is this one. So you see these are the ones I've labeled: box, forward, go to start. So as soon as you make a symbol, it will throw it in that menu so you can choose which one you want to deal with. It also puts it in the library, which is this tab next to the properties. So all your symbols are also going to be here, and if you ever want to reuse a symbol, you can simply take it from here and drag and drop it onto the stage and use it again. This little clacker, I guess it is, like movies. This is where your scenes are. So a scene means that you can get a whole new stage again. And you can get as many scenes as you want. There could be 100 scenes. And you just have to have a way to navigate from one to the next. And you can use buttons for that, just like we've been using buttons to move from frame to frame. So in order to make a new scene, I'll make a new scene right now so you can see how to do that one. You simply or use insert scene, and it makes a new scene. Now we're at scene 2. And as soon as you make a new scene, it puts it in the menu. Here's scene 1, here's scene 2. Okay, here's our symbols, etc. So here we are in scene 2. So let's say scene 2, I'm going to make something new happen. This time I will take this little object here that I'm going to make, and I'll make that into a new little animation. So again, I've selected it. I'll convert it to a symbol. I'll make it a movie clip just like before, and I'll call it green thing. How about? And I will make it animate by right-clicking on the frame and say create motion tween. Throws me out to 1 second. I'll just leave that, that's fine. And I will drag it out there, and now it animates like that. And by the way, if you want, you can drag this little line that it makes, and it will follow that like a guide. See, like that. Okay, so now we need to make a button to get you into this scene and a button to get you back out of this scene. So let's go back to scene 1 to create that button. So here's my scene navigator. Go to scene 1. And I will make a new layer. Remember, everything needs its own layer. And I'll call this the scene button. So I know what's going on. Make sure I've clicked on that frame right there because I want to make sure it doesn't put it on some other layer accidentally. And I'll make like a little green oval and select it. Turn it into a button. Convert to symbol. Button. I'll call it my scene changer. And since I'm going to have another one later to get back, maybe I'll make it scene changer 1. I can make the next one scene changer 2. It is a button. Good. Okay, it's a button. Great. So now let's code that button. So I've got it selected, clicked it. Window, I'll go directly to the code snippets. Action script, timeline navigation. So the very last one here on the timeline is click to go to scene and play, which is what I want. So I double click that, click, and it automatically defaults to scene 3. I don't even have a scene 3. I could make one if I want, but I want to go to scene 2. So I will just put the 2 in there. And this is what Animate will do. It'll give you these defaults, like when it gives you 1 second of animation, when you do a tween, that's just a default, or go to frame 5 if it's a go to and play, and then for scenes it goes to 3. Anyway, you just make those numbers the ones you want. So mine is scene 2. Okay, so let's see what happens. Here's my, the buttons that we saw before. But if I click the green button, it goes to scene 2, and it plays. You'll notice it played and then immediately went back to scene 1 and stopped. So that's the rest of the loop. Animate wants to loop and loop and loop. So unless I tell it to stop at scene 2, it'll just loop back around and start at the beginning again, which is frame 1, scene 1. So let's not have that happen. Let's go to the scene 2. Here we are at scene 2. And what I wanted to do is play it, right here, play it. And then I want it to stop at the end of it. I don't want it to go back to the previous scene. I just want it to stop right there. All right, so here we are. I put the playhead. I'm at scene 2, and I put the playhead out at the end of it. And notice there's no action layer yet. But as soon as I click the stop at this frame, if I double click it, it makes my action layer, and it makes a keyframe, and it puts a little action on top of it. So let's test it out again. Command return. Here's my scene button, and it plays and stops. I have no way of getting back to scene 1 right now. Let's make a way of doing that. So I'm still in scene 2. Here, I'll close this window so you can see. I'm still here in scene 2. Remember, this is scene 2. And I'll make a, I'm going to start with the playhead at 1 again, because that's where I'm going to code the button. I was like coding everything at 1 if I can. I'm going to make a new layer. I think I'll leave the action layer at the top, so I'll select this one. Whatever layer you select, the new layer is going to go one above it. So this is going to be my button to go back. I'll just call it that. And I will make, I think I'll have a different color here. I'll make now a blue button. Select it, modify, convert to symbol. Button, I'll just call it back button, I guess. Hope I haven't used that already. It's a button, remember? So select that from the menu. There it is. And you'll notice every time you make something, it throws it in the library window here. So here it is. And so now I just have to code that. I want it to go to a scene and start playing. In this case, I want it to go back to scene 1. So I'm going to double click it. It opens up my actions and it writes this stuff for me. And then I'm going to put in a 1 for the scene 1 right there, because that's where I want it to go. So I think this should work. Let's see. Command return. So here we are in scene 1. We got my animation and stuff and all that. Here's my scene button over here. I click it. It goes to scene 2 and stops. And then I click the blue button and bam, we're back in scene 1. So scene 2, scene 1, scene 2, scene 1. There you go. So that is quickly how you can make stuff happen either by frame or by scene. And remember, anytime you say insert scene, it makes a new one. You can make 100 scenes and make new things happen. You can make things simply go to frames down the road here and make new things happen there too. So I'll just do one quick demonstration of that. So here we are. Let's go back to scene 1 again. That's where I want things to be. You'll notice I can't take the playhead down the road right now. I can't go any further than the 2 seconds. The reason why, because I don't have any keyframes that are out there. So I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to leave my actions at the top, so I won't select that. So here's my new layer, and I'm going to call it this layer new thing. That's just some new thing that's going to happen out there. And in order to make something happen out there, I'm going to go out here to some arbitrary frame that's past these frames that I've used and right click on it. And I can either insert a frame or a keyframe. It's good to always start with a keyframe. It means something new is going to be there. So now the playhead will go all the way out to frame 60 where I made a new frame. And you'll notice that there's nothing out there, but the playhead will go there. So let's put something out there. I'll put some text. I selected my text key right here, and I will put some text to let us know that we're there. And by the way, you can animate the text if you wish. You could simply select it, modify it, convert to symbol. I'll call it my text symbol, and I don't want it to be a button, I want it to be a movie clip. And it puts an envelope around it, and if I want to animate it, I can again right-click over here and say Create Motion Tween. You'll notice this time it didn't throw us out a second in time. It just doesn't do that over here. So you can roll your mouse over that keyframe, and you see it becomes these 2 arrows, and you can drag it out anywhere you wish, and then that will be the length of the tween. You see the blue area is where it's tweening, meaning that's where it's going to do something, move. So at the end of here, at 90, I will then move this somewhere, and now I've got a moving tween right there. All right, cool. Now let's get a button to let us go there, because right now I can't get there. Remember, I've got a stop action here at 2 seconds, so I can't go out there. So I need to have a new button. I'll make a new button right like this. And I will select it and convert it to a symbol, and I'll make it a button, and I'll call it the Go Out There button. So I know what it is. Oops, I don't want to do that yet until I give it a new layer. Let me give it a new layer. I always put everything on, always good to have everything on a layer. It keeps Animate from getting confused. So I'll just call it just the Button Out There layer. Okay. And so I've selected it, and so now I need to convert it to a symbol, make it a button, and I'll call it the Out There button. Okay. And I'm now going to go to Windows, Code Snippets, and Action Script, Timeline. And I want that button to go to and play frame 60. Go to frame and play. And put 60 in there. Okay, that works. And let's see if it works. Command Enter, click my Go Out There, there it is. And then it loops around and goes back to the start again. If I don't want it to loop, I need to put an action, a stop action, here at frame 90 where I'm done with my little animation. So I will right click, here's my action layer right here. I don't really have to right click anything. I'm just going to choose that frame and just put a stop action. Double click. Kabam. There's a stop action now at frame 90. Test it out again. There's my go out there button and it stops. If I wanted to go somewhere else or go back to 1, I could put a new button there that will go back to 1 or go to another scene or whatever I want to do. So you'll notice if there is nothing in the layers, you can't go there, or nothing in the frames, you can't go there out here. You have to put a keyframe out there or a frame out there, and then it will go there. And whenever you make a keyframe and put something there, it will persist. It will stay there until the end of these frames that you've drawn out. You'll notice here, look at this area right here. See, I've got no gray area, no frames over here. So all this stuff that was right here, as soon as it gets past my last gray thing right here, it disappears. The only thing that stayed is this new thing button because I've got frames for it. So if you have no frames for it, there's simply nothing there, it disappears. So you can see now you can make buttons to go elsewhere in the timeline, and in a way it'll act like new scenes because there's nothing else out there until you put something there. So you can either navigate by frames or scenes as you wish. So that's simple navigation with Adobe.